Welcome to another episode of the Journeys of Not So Ordinary People podcast. This is your personal, professional, and career development podcast. I am one of your co hosts. I'm Dr. Joe Hamlett, and alongside me is Dr. Dave Peltz. How are you doing, Dr. Dave?
Most excellent, sir. Most excellent.
All right. Well, thanks for tuning in. If you are a returning viewer or audience member, thanks for coming back. And so, if you are getting something out of this, please be sure to push this on to other people that may benefit from this content. Me and Dave enjoy doing this weekly. We're into season 4 and we enjoy doing this. So, with that, if you are viewing this episode, you can see we have a guest on our screen today. So, I'm going to introduce you to Mr. Josh White. So, how are you doing, sir?
I'm doing outstanding, even better now that I'm hanging out with you two this morning. So thank you. Really happy to be here.
Absolutely. So we know you, but let's give our audience a chance to get to know you. So go ahead and share who you are briefly so that we can get kicked off.
Absolutely. So I'm a fourth generation airman, and I like to kick that off because that's a big part of my story and who I am and my identity, especially since the Superman in my life, my dad, I seen him in blues every day. So I was primarily raised in Waldorf, Maryland. Had five sisters on my dad's side. I have one brother on
Wow.
my mom's side. She lived in South Carolina. Um, in the military was a very big part of my upbringing, the values of it, the story, the history behind it. It really got me into that headspace at a really young age. And then when I finally did join, I was a maintainer on the flight line called Aerospace Ground Equipment. I did that for 6 years, and then I retrained as a medic. At that point, I had a lot of opportunities open up through, hard work and discipline to include running running military funeral honors for the state of Missouri. So I got to do that for 2 years. And then I came back to being a medic. I'm currently stationed at Eglin Air Force Base, Florida. Recently had a deployment to Israel. So I got
Wow.
to be, we're all trying to be combat medics now. It's a new philosophy that
Okay.
we've adopted from the Army. And I actually got to test that out by going to Israel and supporting the IDF with training and exercises and things like that to help prepare them and to see what a joint force would look like. And that leads me to here today on my last lick of service here. I'm fully retired 1 February, and I've been on terminal leave for the past month, and I've been in a skill bridge program. I'm not sure if y'all are familiar with that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we
Absolutely.
briefly talked about that before, but it's like an internship afforded to military members as they depart the service. And I spent mine with public affairs, where I got to really hone my craft on video editing, audio editing, things like that. It's been an absolute blast and a great program to transition to my civilian life. And my next career will be a resiliency coach, a prevention specialist. So, we'll get into my story as we go forward, but it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows, right? It was really difficult, really challenging, and I'm going to be able to, as a civilian, provide that info that I was so desperately seeking years ago to, help with, professional development right behind you, emotional, spiritual, social, physical, mental. Literally, I'm focused on those for Team Eglin, and I start that in about 2 weeks.
Wow. Wow. Well, thanks for that introduction. You even passed on some stuff that I don't know that we even talked about. So great to have you here on the podcast. And with that, we're just going to jump right into our topic today, which is influence investing in others and yourself. So, where do we start with that, Josh?
So, as I said, I'm fourth generation Air Force. Um, it was on my heart and mind to join to make my family proud. And the reason I picked that topic was because mentorship is so important, right? Finding those people in my life helped save my life, helped turn my life around. At some point, you're going to have to invest in yourself.
Right.
And after that, once you've mastered that, or as close as you could master it, you start extending it to others. I think that's a pretty normal progression, but for me, the lows got really low. So if I take it back to when I first joined, wasn't really sure what to expect. I mean, my dad wore the uniform for 26 years, and he set the bar pretty high. He came from a poor kid from West Virginia living in trailers to becoming a senior master sergeant, becoming a commander, and retiring ultimately as a commander and as a major at Andrews Air Force Base. So
Wow.
it's one of those things where it fuels you, it inspires you, but as you don't quite fulfill what your parents did, there's a shame to that. It's not their fault, obviously, but although I had everything I needed as a child being raised, there were some things missing there. Divorce ripped my family apart. I mean, like it became their purpose in life. It became their identity.
Wow.
And it resulted with my stepmom losing her life. So this is some pretty, tragic and impactful things that me as a kid, I just didn't know how to cope with that,
Right.
and I think a lot of airmen, when they join, sometimes they're escaping something. I think that's more common than we realize. I mean, it's so hard and kind of insane to leave your entire life behind to start a new one. Most people would never do that. They're trying to look for community college because it's next to their parents. They're trying to look for,
Right.
they're
Yep.
mapping their whole future out to keep their support system around them. But what if I asked you to just forget all that and start over with strangers? I mean, that's an insane thing to do, right? So a lot of airmen, especially on the enlisted side, we were cool with leaving. There's a reason we
Right.
were okay with it, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And it's not all good things sometimes. Sometimes it's to escape something. And that's why I think being a supervisor and helping airmen and each other, across all branches is such a tremendous skill to have. That awareness that, hey, these people are relying on you to help them get to where you are, right? And everyone's path is different, but to understand that they might be joining with some baggage, I think is a normal thing that we just don't ever talk about. And so, yeah, I mean, it was a brutal first start, and my first base was Guam, and I went with my entire tech school class, and so that was a great first base experience, right? I'm
Right.
there with 10 people that I spent the last 6 months with, who are great human beings, some of which are my best friends to this very day. And they were a great support system to have because I just felt so just out of my league. I wasn't sure how to study for these rapid fire tech school tests. I mean, it was a lot. And I'm not a maintainer, but naturally. So this was really stretching to get through it. But they helped me get through it. The true test didn't come until my second assignment, which was Kadena Air Base, Japan. When I was placed on 12s, I was placed on night shift. And this went on for, almost the entire 2 years I was there, where I wouldn't see the light of day. I had no idea who my boss was. I didn't know who ran the base. I just knew I was in gas mask all the time on the flight line, just trucking along, just trying to make it through the next day, right? And so this is when my bad habits really started happening because I didn't have any investment, right? I had no mentors. It was such an isolated environment. And that's when I started drinking. The drinking age was 18 in Guam, and I went nuts with that. But of course, I was 18, right? So I could bounce back. Eventually, you can't bounce back. Like you start seeing signs.
Right.
And by the time I got to Japan, I just figured the easiest way to get through it, the depression, the anxiety, the worry of what's next, all those, my childhood and all those problems I had back then, and they're kind of catching up with me. Only thing I could think of at the time was just to keep drinking. That became a daily ritual of mine, which over time became something called passive suicide. So there's active suicide, the act of ending your life in one situation, one scenario. But there's actually a much more common thing that we don't often see. That's called passive suicide. That's I have no regard for my health, no regard for my well-being. I don't care if I don't wake up tomorrow. I'm going to do this bad habit as many times as I need to get through life until I just don't have a life. That's called passive suicide. And that I didn't know that at the time, but that's the space that I entered. The third assignment was Whiteman Air Force Base. Now, I grew up near DC, right? Uh, the biggest culture shock out of all three assignments wasn't overseas, it was Whiteman Air Force Base. It was Missouri. I'm like, what? am I in the Wizard of Oz? Like, where's the yellow brick road? Like, this is crazy, y'all. Like, how do I have an apartment and a cow is like right there, right? Like that was the biggest culture shock to me. And so I've come to realize I'm kind of more of a city person because when I got to my shop and they were like, "Why do you put gel in your hair, man? You're weird." And I'm just like, "Oh man, where am I?" Trying to click my heels 3 times, that's not working. Everyone's listening to Kenny Chesney. I'm like, who is that? So it was a different culture, right? And I really didn't fit in. And so the drinking just became easier and easier. And at some point, I was looking for a rock bottom, which is a common story we see. This hero of the story, they hurt themselves or they get hurt or there's some sort of event where they have a redemption of sorts, right? That's kind of built in our head with storytelling in the world. So at some point, I started looking for a rock bottom to just either I pass away and I'm good with that because I don't have to deal with this life anymore, or something so bad happens that everyone intervenes, saves me, and I turn my life around, right? There's these cries for help that we put out there knowingly or unknowingly. And if you're not investing in your team, investing in your airmen, you'll never catch those signs. You just straight up miss them. But we all knowingly or unknowingly ask for help in those situations. And mine was coming into work late every day, alcohol smells on me. I remember doing inspections and like falling asleep on the equipment.
Wow.
In the med group, if you do that, you're just done. Patient care is just so crazy important. But in maintenance, I had a lot more flexibility to get away with stuff like that. And the supervisors were just not equipped to ask those tough questions. Almost like, hey, if I don't ask, I don't know.
Right.
And that is
Right.
just the wrong approach to have, especially with 22 a day, people losing their lives left and right, veterans
Right.
passing away. You can't be afraid to ask those tough questions. It's those tough questions that actually save lives. Um, and so my big event was I got the flu mist, which I don't know if y'all ever had to take this in the service, but you
Yeah.
snort it,
Yeah.
right? It's a really weird vaccine. You got to snort it. Everyone's trying to spit it out right away. Well, the reason that's a different, vaccine is it's a live virus. It's much more potent. It works way better, but in the beginning, it really kicks your butt, right? It has like a little extra bite to it. And that was the missing piece of the puzzle in my body to end my life, which sounds crazy. But my bad health habits, my depression, my anxiety, all that, once I took that flu mist, I had no immune system somehow. It just went away. Like the will to not want to live removed my immune system. It's crazy how powerful your brain could be over your body. And I found myself going to the hospital with chest pain. I felt like I was having a heart attack. I'm like, what is going on? I remember even taking a sip of beer, one sip, and my chest just lit up like I was gonna die. My heart started beating real fast. I was like, okay, something insane is happening, right? I go to the ER. They hook me up, and they're like, uh-oh. Like they got this look on their face, like I gotta get my boss. I'm like, what is it? Well, the EKG said I'm having a heart issue of sorts. I get rushed to Kansas City. Come to find out, my heart expanded to almost twice its size. It's called
Wow.
Wow.
myocarditis, and it can absolutely be lethal.
Wow.
I'll tell you what saved my life though was my dad visiting. That comfort of having my dad there, having someone that loves you around you mentally, that healed me so much that I got through that event. And I get back, on leave. I'm on leave for like months, from this. And I'm thinking, I'm gonna turn it all around now. Like that was it. That was the scare. And as I went back to work, you could imagine, how my hope diminished when I still didn't have those mentors. I still didn't have those
Right.
relationships.
Yeah.
I'm still me. And I fell right back into it. I couldn't believe it. Like the moment it hit me is a morning I woke up after I puked all over myself, and somehow survived. And I looked at myself, covered in vomit from drinking the night before. And I'm like, I have no hope. Like, this is it. If that didn't save me, if that didn't turn me around, then nothing will. I just had to accept it. And that's a really dark place to be. Really dark.
Josh, your story and your message is so powerful. I believe, and I'm even going to go so far as to say, I know that there are so many military personnel that are going through the exact same thing that you did, that I did, these just the coping mechanisms, from being in a, writing that blank check, as we say, that is something that most people cannot even fathom.
Hmm.
We signed our lives over to an entity to say, do what you want with me, you know, and they didn't provide us the coping mechanisms to understand what that really meant. And so people deal with things in different ways. Some people become hyper athletic. Some people, resort to drinking like you did and like I did. And some people just get lost. Some people do find their ways, and that's a good thing. But for those that get lost, to your point, we kind of get ignored, or just set aside or cast aside or, shunned or whatever, because we're trying to deal with this stuff and no one's throwing us that lifeline when we were told, um, in our conditioning phases, that we are here to help you. We're brothers and sisters. We're family. We'll throw you that life preserver. And then when you need it, sometimes they don't do that. And that kind of messes with your head. And I just want to advocate for you because, you sharing this story, being so transparent, I think is what a lot of active military and veterans need to hear, that they are absolutely not alone. You know, they
Well,
all they go ahead, Joe.
well, I was just going to say what really got me was when you talked about, how all of us were willing to just run away because we probably were taking some baggage with us. And you're right. That's a lot of us, because Dave just said it too. For us to say, hey, I'm willing to make the ultimate sacrifice, not really understanding what that means, but we want to get away so bad in a lot of cases that we're willing to accept that. And that the way that you said that, it really struck me as, wow, that is the truth, that a lot
Mhm.
of us come there with that baggage, and then we don't get the assistance we need. We don't get the leaders that can help us because they're just like us. They
Mhm.
came from broken homes, broken environments, something they were running away from, and now we put them in, and make them responsible for other people with that same baggage. And so it is, you definitely are not in a situation where it, you have hope. So yeah, that definitely hit me when you said that.
No, I
And
appreciate that, y'all.
I'm gonna tack on to that just a little bit. You know, um, there I just forgot what I was gonna say. It was right in line with what Joe was saying. We bring the baggage and stuff. Yeah, I'll think of it. Yeah, my
Dave, I do
bad.
want to ask you a question. You alluded to you went through it yourself. I know it's my episode, but just out of curiosity as a host myself, I would love to hear just a little bit on what that looked like for you.
Yeah, my first base was overseas in the Netherlands. That's where I spent my first 3 years. It was a World War II base, joint owned. And I wasn't the best troop beginning. I didn't know how to be, I guess. I went through tech school, and I was a cop in the Air Force. Enjoyed it, but just was floating down the river, as Joe and I say, with our careers. I didn't understand how to take control of it. And one of my supervisors had a coming to God speech with me. Thank goodness for that. And it got my head turned around. So the last year and a half I was there, I was excelling. Taking, I did so many things, and I wasn't recognized for them. Enough to get, multiple medals, and I didn't even get recognized for that, for my effort. And after the first Gulf War, they were redoing the tarmac, and uh, our chief made an example out of me for something that I was told to do by my supervisor. And that put me in a really dark place. It's like, well, if I'm doing what I'm told and I'm being punished for it, where's my support system? They're supposed to be, you know, they're recognizing my efforts and understanding, hey, I was told to do something and now they're burning me for it. I mean, that's crazy.
Yeah,
And
that made you probably feel not safe at all in that
oh yeah,
environment.
yeah,
Question,
yeah.
I mean, you were already worried, and now you're worrying about everything, not only you say and do, but what you're being told to do.
Hmm.
That's an insane amount of stress to just walk around second guessing yourself.
Yeah, yeah. So sorry, didn't mean to detract from your story, so please continue.
No, hey, I asked. I'm interested, Dave. I could tell you got that. You got, we have that common ground. You just pick up on that from someone. So that's why I kind of pulled that thread a little bit. So thanks for sharing that. So, we get to the story. My story is not unique. I'm just transparent about it. Like you said, Joe, but it's not unique. Certainly not. But here's the sad part. It ends in very bad ways, right? It ends
Mhm.
with suicide. It ends with drinking yourself to death. It ends with, sure, I'll do those drugs and then getting kicked out because you get piss tested the very next day, because of course you did. It ends very badly. And I'll tell you if I could tell myself back then a message with information I know now, that would be I was looking in the wrong place to turn my life around the whole time. I
Hmm.
was looking in the wrong direction. It's not a rock bottom that's going to ultimately save you. It's the opposite direction of the spectrum. It's love, connection, being seen, being heard, really owning who you are, facing that, and allowing love into your heart from other people, which will then allow you to love yourself too. And it takes a tremendous amount of work. And what that looked like for me was not drinking anymore. Could I do it? It sounds easy. It's a pretty simple concept. Just don't drink, right? Just don't put that substance in your mouth and you're good. It's harder than you think, though. And if you try to stop after you've been depending on it so long, because when you're drinking every day or relying on any substance, really, you are, in a sense, frozen in time as far as your development goes, right? It's been a crutch for so long that you can't operate without it. You don't know who you are without it, matter of fact. And that's a scary place to be in. Um, there's a lot more support systems and encouragement today, but back then it was all about being perfect. So I
Yeah.
was, to be shamed even further for admitting I had this problem, it was just a fate worse than death, right? And that's why I believe they've created these other opportunities to raise your hand and get that help, because they recognize, like, hey, we treated people real bad that asked for help. I mean, it ruined their career. Like, if they didn't outright kick them out, it definitely reflected on their annual report.
Right.
And we're just going to weed them out. You got to be perfect. You got to be 100% in all categories to succeed here, which is an insane thing to ask of someone.
Yeah. I'm going to
Um,
interject, Josh.
yeah,
You said it again, and this is where I was going, that we can't talk about these things, or we couldn't. I know in my generation and Joe's generation being in the military early on in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s, you couldn't talk about that stuff without getting kicked out or worse. I mean, they did they didn't want to know that you weren't sleeping well. They didn't want to know that you had a drinking problem or thought that you might have a drinking problem. They didn't want to know or even hear that you're stressed or feeling anxiety or any of that stuff. To your point, we had to be perfect. We had to be the role models. And if we even remotely alluded to that sort of thing, it was just like asking to have your ass handed to you with an Article 15, having your stripes taken and getting kicked out with a bad conduct discharge for a medical reason that was not identified or talked about back then.
exactly. And do you think those people did well when they were removed? Was that even a concern of ours? With the small force we have today, it better be a concern of ours. Okay,
Yeah.
because when we had those giant numbers coming off the Gulf War, we can't treat this small force the same way and just say, nah, you can just leave, whatever. No, the
Yeah.
investment we make in this small force today that's an insane investment. We cannot lose those airmen.
Mhm.
We just simply cannot. And that's going to mean us being more interpersonal, more transparent, and more
Yeah.
connected than we ever needed to be before. Because if you have an office of 20 and now you have an office of 5, do you think the dynamic has changed at all? I would say it absolutely
Absolutely.
changes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Because the mission's only grown too. Well, think about that. The patient loads are growing, the deployments are growing. Yet now you have a fourth of the team that I started with in 2004. I
Mhm.
mean, that's a lot to ask of somebody. You don't want to lose them. You don't want to let them walk out the door. That's a huge fail
Or
on
even fall
leadership
out the door, you know.
or fall out the door. Exactly. And guess what? We're all going to be separated or retired one day. So to say that, oh, they'll figure it out, whatever, just let them leave. That's going to be you one day. You're going to be, I'm
Right.
taking the uniform off now. I'm super thankful for everyone who invested in me, who's checking on me. That's tremendous. Okay, y'all. So the turning point, the big turning point was when I got to military funeral honors, right? I would never step out my comfort zone. I avoided it like the plague. But when I stopped drinking and I started going in the right direction, it was not easy. I felt super uncomfortable. I was triggered many times, but I stayed the course. And I took little things here and there, little by little, taking baby steps, run a commander's call, run flight PT, real small things that built my confidence up. I became the fill in first sergeant for 3 months. Huge deal, huge responsibility. That turned into, hey, you'd be a good exec for the commander, to fill in. It's typically an officer role, but you can fill in. So I filled in for that. I made my commander laugh, so she just hired me full time. At least that's what I say. I made her crack up all the time, and she's like, you know what? You're not going anywhere. That led to, hey, you know what? Honor Guard's not doing well here at Whiteman. They need someone like you. What do you think? And I saw clearly it started 2 years ago with that commander's call I took on, and now look where I'm at. In just 2 years' time, I'm about to run a huge base program that it's highly competitive, highly coveted. You're pretty much guaranteed a promotion with something like this. I'm like, wow, I started actually feeling proud of myself. Ran the base honor guard, hardest job I've ever had. I mean, and most rewarding. We did 7 active duty funerals that takes your whole team. 5 of those were suicides. You can imagine, handing flags to children, to spouses
Right.
over someone who's the husband, an airman, just ended their life on active duty orders. It's very hard. But I gotta say, being there for other people in their darkest moments, healed me. Because I knew our team was providing this tremendous closure, this tremendous sense of pride. We're essentially taking a piece of ourself, because you better believe that was hard to get through emotionally. I mean, we were shaking because it is that strong of an emotional event. When you're hearing that whole person's life before you even hand the flag, you're standing there at attention for hours, just listening to their whole career, their whole life, and then to provide the honors after that. And that made me and my team grow so close, so tight knit. People came forward to me once they trusted me and said, "Hey, I thought about hurting myself. How can I get help?" Like, they found this moment to focus on themselves. And the more I invested in them, the more they showed up for each other. I mean, honestly, I set the pace for that. I saw it clearly, and that whole process healed me, like in ways that I can't even explain. And it all was being there for investing in others. It was all loving other people, loving their story, their journey, and then having that connection. It truly healed me. And although I set out to just not drink for a year or two, it's been like 7 years now, and I've never picked it up again. I just said, you know what, I'm better off without it. I've made it through. I'm doing the impossible. I thought I'd be dead by now. So every day now is like a huge blessing. Like, what can I do today? What can I do today? Because I never thought I'd be here.
Right.
And to be living proof of turning yourself around when you've completely given up on yourself is why I do the podcast. It's why I share stories. It's why I'm transparent. I don't want anyone to look at me like I looked at leaders back then and said, "Oh, they're perfect." I'm not. I'm broken. And now I feel even worse about it because I feel like I'm the only one that's struggling on this team. No, I want you to see that I'm married, retired senior NCO, leading this podcast, helping people like crazy. I want you to see that and then realize that I'm not perfect and I did not always live this life, that I had to work my ass off for it, but you can do it too. Here's how I did it. That's become my mission in life at this point. That's why I started the podcast.
Right. No, I think that's very similar to why me and Dave start the podcast because now if you look at the titles we have and the things that we've accomplished, immediately people already have some idea of how you got there. And so that's why we share our stories as often as we can, just so people can relate, know that we may have started like them, or maybe in a better position or maybe worse than them, and where we are today. So you're right. That's why it's important to tell your story so that people can relate to you, know that you're human, know that you've had struggles, traumas just like them. And so that's what it's about, sharing your story, hopefully helping someone else. And me and Dave say this all the time, not to have to go down that that take that long scenic route, or
Right.
that road less traveled, where or that doomsday road where things don't look so great. So that's why this podcast is here, like you said, to share, to hopefully help somebody else. And we've said this many times, out of all the 150 plus episodes we've done, if we can help one person, then we've succeeded. And that's the way we'll continue to approach this. So Josh, wow, that was very powerful, everything you share with us.
I
That was
appreciate that, y'all. And I have something I want to show you. I think you, as doctors, will appreciate this.
okay.
Uh-oh.
After 20 years, I have my bachelor's degree.
Oh wow,
Oh,
cool.
congratulations,
Congratulations.
man. Right on.
Congratulations.
Right on.
Yes,
Thank you. Thank you.
absolutely.
Got that
Yes.
bachelor's, y'all. I was running out of TA money and time, and you know, uh, I said, you know what? I set out these goals. I'm going to accomplish it. And
Absolutely.
there's many late nights, but we got it done. And I'll tell you, you do want it before you get out, because as soon as I rolled into the GS role, a lot of those high up spots, like 11 and above, you need a
You
bachelor's.
gotta
Doesn't
have
matter
that
what it
degree.
is.
Yep. Yep.
So right as I
Absolutely.
applied for jobs, that thing came in, and I said, boom, boom, boom. Applied for jobs, got a job. Like it came in clutch right at the last minute. But I didn't do it in 4 years. I did it in 20. But I'm
Oh,
still.
believe me, we know what that's like.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But it's a great
Congratulations.
it's a great way to look at my life too, right? Those
Mhm.
Yep.
baby steps.
Yep.
Like it did take me longer, but I'm way better off for it, right? So I started down here and now I'm way up here. I'm in a whole different life with whole different opportunities
Right.
because of
Right.
those baby steps. Don't ever dismiss the progress, even if it's small.
Yeah, and that's what we say
Yep.
too. Even if you, just do something small every day or frequently, you'll get there.
Got about
100%.
2 minutes left, guys. So
So with everything I shared with y'all, is there anything that you want to share that comes to your heart, your mind, or anything you wanted to ask?
I just want to say thank you for being on the podcast. I mean, Josh, thank you for the transparency and the intimacy of your struggles, because I know a lot of people out there have gone through or are currently going through what you did, what I did, what many other people did,
Yeah.
and they did it alone, and they don't need to. So I just want to thank you, brother, for the intimacy, the transparency, and the love that you shared on this podcast today.
Absolutely. I'm happy to do it. And why I love podcasting and guys like yourself is the joy you get from helping others. Like that's the
Absolutely.
cherry on top to the whole thing,
Yeah.
right? So if anyone is like me, I'm trying to focus on me and you're not getting anywhere, try focusing on someone else. See what happens. Try
Right.
helping those people in your life that are struggling. Help them. See if that helps you. I bet it will.
Yeah. Well, again, this has been a great episode, and again, thanks for sharing your story. Like Dave said, I think this will help other people out there that may have gone through similar situation or currently going through it. So, thanks for your vulnerability, and again, sharing. I know it's kind of difficult to share that, but again, I think it's important for us to share our stories. Um, so, again, thanks for being on the podcast.
Yeah, and thank you guys too. Thanks for what you're trying to do. You're trying to save lives. Ultimately, you're trying to improve lives, and it
Yeah.
takes an insane amount of effort and determination to maintain a podcast at the standard that you've set yours at. So, as a fellow content creator, a fellow kindred spirit, um, I just want to say thank you for doing what you do, for the messages that you are working so hard to put out. And thank you for having me join your incredible platform.
Wow, thank you.
Thanks, Josh. That means a lot,
Yeah.
very much so. Well, again, it's been a great episode. I think really heartfelt, and again, hopefully, people out there heard it or seen this episode and can take something away from it. I think one of the highlights I take away from it is that we are not alone. All of us have struggled. All of us have had traumas, and but there's somebody else that is going through the same thing, or maybe even worse. So just continue to think about. Um, it will get better. It can get better. Again, thanks for Josh coming on the podcast, and we'll have all of his information. If you want to hear his podcast or get in touch with him, we'll have his information in our description. With that, though, we do appreciate you all showing up. Again, if somebody you know may benefit from these podcasts, please forward, share, like, comment, let us know what you want to hear about. With that, we want you to continue being your not so ordinary you.